So Harry Potter convinced 1 billion people that you were either born with magic or you weren't. It was perfectly natural and no one questioned that. Witch Hat Atelier questions it in the first chapter, and the answer they got isn't the most comfortable. So, if you grew up with Harry Potter, which if you're here watching this video, you definitely grew up with Harry Potter, then you thought that separation of the magical and the ordinary was perfectly natural. But what if I told you it wasn't? What if I told you it was something that was deliberately built and fiercely maintained by the people who benefit from it? From page 1 of Witch Hat Atelier, Kamome Shirahama does something J.K. Rowling couldn't do, asking who built this system, who benefits from keeping anyone else on the other side, and what happens when one ordinary girl proves the entire system is based on a lie. And hey, and before you click off, this isn't just another "is this like Harry Potter" video, because the short answer is it's not. The long answer, Witch Hat Atelier does something more honest and way more interesting with the idea of magic that hits way harder. Okay, so I hope I'm speaking to the right people, because I think Witch Hat Atelier challenges something that the story of Harry Potter failed to do. Now, don't get me wrong, Harry Potter matters, and this isn't a Harry Potter takedown video. I mean, Diagon Alley felt real to millions of people and to a bunch of kids and adults alike. Hogwarts was the first place that made them feel like magic could actually exist somewhere. But in Harry Potter, the wizarding world runs on top of a fundamental division, witches and wizards on one side, muggles on the other. The story presents this dichotomy as some people are born with magic and most people are not. The world is split, but that split is genetic. Muggles don't have magic, squibs can't use it, and although blood purity is framed as villain ideology, the very structure of the world doesn't challenge it. Magic is still something that dwells within bloodlines, and the people who have it are still special by birth. Even the protagonists of the story don't necessarily desire to change that division, except for the one person who comes from the other side of the divide, Hermione. But in Witch Hat Atelier, however, the issues within the witch society are challenged by both the story and the characters as well. The goal here isn't to simply defeat a big bad evil, but to essentially make magic an equal use of power. If Harry Potter says magic is only for those born with it, Witch Hat Atelier says that all can use magic and we should stop gatekeeping it. But here's the thing, both media present you with the idea that magic is something that only the special and gifted have access to. But whilst one protagonist decides to become an enforcer of the status quo, the other one begins to question why a certain group has decided to hide this power from everyone else, especially when they do meet someone that would be better off if they had access to magic. Who's decided this division was even real? Let's go back to Harry Potter briefly. Take Hermione Granger. She's a muggle-born with no clear magical lineage. She's brilliant, she works harder than almost anyone else, and she fights to prove that she belongs to this magical world. Hermione fights for her right to belong in a system that is never questioned by anyone. She doesn't ask why the wizards have ostracized themselves from the muggles, she asks to be worthy of being with the wizards, and the series rewards her for this mentality. She proves herself and the system remains. When the villains take the structural divide too far by introducing prejudice based on this divide, the story asks for you to reject the prejudice, not the divide. Now compare Coco to Hermione. In Harry Potter, Coco would simply be a muggle. This muggle draws a sigil she has no business being able to draw, and it works. And this is why the magic system in this series is worth talking about. In this series, if you have a steady hand, you can draw the sigils required to use magic. Last time I checked, anyone should be able to do that. But the reason ordinary people don't isn't because of innate biology. It's because there's some people out there that decided that they just shouldn't know. When Hogwarts finds out that a child born of muggles can do magic, they take them in. But when the Witch Society and WHA finds out an outsider can do magic, the system reaches out to take the memory away. Which is why I think the magic system in Witch Hat Atelier is better than Harry Potter's. It doesn't pretend that the division is natural. It pulls back the veil to show you who built this system, who benefits, and whether or not that system deserves to continue unchallenged. Harry Potter's magic system is accessible and easy to understand, but I say, it's lacking a certain something because it brings up real questions about discrimination within a magical society, but never bothers to go beyond that to question the very structure. So, if you ask me if I think WHA is like Harry Potter, I'd say yeah, in that they both involve young people finding out that the world is much bigger than they thought it was, but only one of them actually asks if their world needs to exist the way it does. Witch Hat Atelier is the second kind of story. Now, we're actually about to dive in, so spoilers ahead, you've been warned. As early as Chapter 1 of Volume 1 in the manga, you're introduced to how magic in the series works. Here, we're introduced to Coco, this bright-eyed little girl who is fascinated with magic. When a flying chariot lands in her village, she meets a mysterious stranger who later explains that he's a witch. Coco talks about how she got sold a magic book and a wand pin, intriguing the stranger. The stranger wants to fix a broken winged chariot in Coco's family shop. He asks Coco to guard the doors so no one peeks. Coco guards the door, and just like any kid would, she peeks anyway. She watches Qifrey draw the sigil. She watches how it works, she memorizes it, and later, alone, she draws the same shape. She uses the magic book she was given to draw even more symbols, which eventually leads to her mother getting petrified. The mysterious stranger, Qifrey, takes her under his wing to teach her magic. Coco and the rest of us learn in this chapter that magic in Witch Hat Atelier is sigil-based. Spells are drawn as precise ink marks. Once you get the marks right, the magic executes, every time, without exception. So, in case you didn't know, Coco is not secretly descended from witches. She's not some chosen one. She doesn't have a lightning bolt scar on her forehead. She's a regular girl in her world. She watched someone draw a shape, and then she drew the same shape, and the magic happened. Because that is literally all magic is in this world, a technology that's learnable. Because if magic is a technology, then the question of who gets to use it is not a question about nature, it's a question about access. And access is always a political decision. Someone makes it, someone benefits from it, someone enforces it. In Witch Hat Atelier, the manga is a 400+ chapter investigation into what the magic system is, who forbids it, and everything in between. So if anyone can do magic, why doesn't everyone know that? We're first introduced to the greater concept of a witch establishment in Chapter 3 of Volume 1 of the manga, when Qifrey travels to report the Coco situation to the Great Hall. This is where the Witch Society's governing structure is introduced for the first time, and where we learn the Brimmed Hat exists as a renegade faction performing forbidden magic. There, a colleague worries whether Coco is connected to them. Forbidden magic are sigils that have been classified as prohibited, whose existence the establishment actively suppresses. The official reason for the prohibition is safety. Forbidden magic is dangerous, they claim. It causes harm, it destabilizes. That's what the establishment says and what most witches inside the system genuinely believe. The manga's argument is that this is only half true at best. Some forbidden magic is genuinely dangerous, sigils that cause irreversible physical damage, spells that cannot be controlled once activated. The series does not pretend otherwise, but the category of forbidden magic is not defined purely by danger. It is defined by threat, specifically threat to the authority of the establishment. Spells that could expose the nature of the system, techniques that could allow outsiders to teach themselves, sigils that, if widely known, would make the entire premise of magical exclusivity impossible to maintain. In Chapter 9 of Volume 2, Orugio explains to Coco that the ban on certain magic came from a dark history of dangerous human experimentation by witch doctors. He sits down with Coco and gives her the establishment's official account of why forbidden magic is forbidden. It's the system's justification, delivered by someone who genuinely believes it. He's not lying. So then, how do they control the spread of magical knowledge? With the memory erasure system. Qifrey warns Coco of this possibility when she first performs magic in Chapter 1, Volume 1. At first, it isn't presented as sinister, it's just normal. When an outsider accidentally discovers magic, they have to get their memory erased. In Chapter 12 of Volume 3, when Coco and Agate are nearly taken by Aesthese after Coco performs a spell that destroys the entire landscape, they nearly get their minds erased. Qifrey manages to stop it, and after the coast is clear, he explains to his apprentices that if the unknowing, people who do not know how to use magic, had figured out what magic really was, they would have needed their memories wiped. Think about what that actually is. Hogwarts teaches magic to everyone born with it. The Witch Society in Witch Hat Atelier teaches magic only to those already inside the system and erases the memory of anyone who discovers it by accident. But the manga builds a case across hundreds of chapters that this is only half the truth at best, because when you really start to think about it, what exactly gives some select group of people the right to cut off magic from others? What gives them the right to decide what kind of magic is wrong or right? At the end of the day, Doesn't it all depend on how the magic is used? This contrast between the witches who perform state-sanctioned magic, the Pointed Hats, and the ones who perform forbidden magic, the Brimmed Hats, is constantly being shown and turned on its head. It's never as simple as one is good and the other is evil. In fact, I say the Brimmed Hats are not simply the villains of this story. Okay, so let me cook, because yes, some of them are dangerous. Yes, they perform forbidden magic. Yes, they experiment on people without consent. They do cause real damage. Yeah, one of them grabs Agate and tried to forcibly carve forbidden glyphs into her skin in chapter 23 of volume 4. Sure, Egwene tried to force Coco herself to draw forbidden magic under duress in chapter 29 of volume 5. These aren't exactly sympathetic scenes. But the Brimmed Hats want to make magical knowledge freely available to everyone, not just the people born inside the system. The witch establishment is maintaining a system of manufactured exclusion, but the Brimmed Hats are anarchists. And this is the medium the series uses to call out the broken divide within the WHA magic system. Their methods are wrong, 100%. Spreading forbidden knowledge without consent, exposing people to truths that change their entire reality, and then leaving them with nothing. But you can still be a villain while challenging the very morality your world is built on. Here's what makes this completely different from every other dark faction in fantasy. Voldemort's diagnosis in Harry Potter is wrong. Blood purity is a lie. You defeat him and the problem he created goes away. But with the Brimmed Hats, if you stop them, the truth they identified is still there. You see this in who they recruit. They target the people the establishment has already failed. People whose memories were wiped. People who discovered magic and were punished for it. People like Custis, who, after the Stairway River incident left him paraplegic, found out that body alteration magic exists and could potentially help him, and was told by the establishment that it's forbidden and he cannot have it. That is the logical consequence of an unjust system. It doesn't just exclude people, it builds the people who will eventually come back for it. So now the question is not just how do we stop the bad guys, the question is what do we do about the thing the bad guys were right about? What does the witch establishment owe the people it excluded? What does reform look like when the injustice is structural, not just a few bad actors at the top? Which brings us back to chapter 1, where Qifrey took interest in Coco because of her possible link to the Brimmed Hats. You might be wondering, what is that link? What is his interest in them beside an ideological opposition? If you haven't read the manga and you want to find this out for yourself, pause right now. Come back after you've caught up, because what I'm about to tell you is manga-only territory. The anime has not gotten there yet, and once you know this, every single scene Qifrey has had with Coco is going to hit completely differently. Still here? Alright, let's talk about Qifrey. From chapter 1, Qifrey looks like the ideal mentor. He takes in a girl who accidentally turned her own mother to stone and decides to teach her instead. You probably didn't think much about it. You should have. What those glasses are concealing is revealed in chapter 36 of volume 7 in a flashback scene. When Qifrey was a child, the Brimmed Hats took him. They were experimenting with a new category of forbidden magic, body modification, living material, something the Great Hall had buried so deep that most witches don't even know it exists, and Qifrey was the trial run. They took his right eye and wiped his memory of everything that happened in the Forest of Tristis. Then they buried him alive and left. He was found by the Knights Morales, taken in by Beldaru of the Three Wise Ones, and grew up inside the Great Hall knowing something had been taken from him, but not what. By chapter 88 of volume 15, we find out what the Brimmed Hats did to him when Coco confronts him. Qifrey takes off his glasses, pulls back his hair, and reveals Silverwood. He assures Coco that he isn't working with the Brimmed Hats, and tells her becoming a host of Silverwood wasn't his choice. Right, Silverwood is what makes the ink that the witches use to draw. When he was younger, the Brimmed Hats seeded the parasitic plant into his body, taking one of his eyes and risking the function of the other one. So basically, we find out that his motivations are far from noble, but rather he's driven by his need to figure out what happened to him, and how to get his revenge and a permanent solution to his curse. Does this make him a villain? No. The manga makes it very clear that he is not secretly undermining the apprentices. But he's also not Dumbledore. Dumbledore was a noble man whose dark past and poor choices led to the creation of the wizarding world's worst enemies, an error he actively tries to correct. Qifrey, on the other hand, sits on the outside of the Pointed Hat and Brimmed Hat dichotomy. He seeks to get revenge on the people that cursed him, while also rejecting the segregation of magic the Pointed Hats maintain. After all, if he were to believe what they say, he is forbidden from finding a cure to his curse. If he was a believer in the system, he wouldn't even be training Coco in the first place. Qifrey ultimately aims to topple the very system that caused his curse to manifest. This is something Dumbledore would never do. After all, what did he really do to address the discrimination in the Potter universe? As of right now, Witch Hat Atelier has over 60 volumes of material in Japanese release, with the English translation by Kodansha still catching up. What the anime adapted is the first arc, but there's still so much more the manga has to say about the intentional suppression of magic by some of the elite. For instance, in Chapter 3 of Volume 1, we find the face behind the entire system, the Great Hall of Hats. It's an underwater structure and the governing body of the entire witch world. It controls the approved spell lists, the prohibited categories, the rules for who can learn magic and what they can do with it. The official story it tells about itself to justify the segregation of magic is that a long time ago, during a period called the Days Before the Pact, magic was used freely and it was catastrophic. People were hurt and the world was damaged. The Pointed Hat stepped in, set limits on magical knowledge, and built the system we see now to make sure that never happened again. But across the later arcs, the manga makes something else clear. The Great Hall's continued enforcement of the prohibition, generations after the original catastrophe, in a world that is completely changed, is not purely about preventing another disaster. It is about maintaining authority. And there's no better argument for how ridiculous the system is than... You want to know how absurd the witch establishment's rules actually are? Watch them through the eyes of someone who has never been taught to accept them. Dagda shows up in Chapter 9 of Volume 2 as a desperate outsider father, banging on the atelier door because his son Custos was in a carriage that fell into a river. He does not know magic is learnable, he just knows witches can help, and his kid is hurt. He becomes one of the most important characters in this manga's argument, not because he's powerful, but because he's an outsider watching the system up close for the first time. His reaction to its injustices is not rage, it is genuine bafflement. When the witch Lelusi declares during the Silver Eve arc that the brim of someone's hat is proof of their guilt, Dagda just stares at her and asks what the shape of a hat has to do with anything. He cannot comprehend how a system this arbitrary became this total. Custos is introduced in Volume 2 as Dagda's adopted son, a young traveling performer around Coco's age, whose caravan falls off a bridge during a disaster. Coco saves him using a new spell, but the fall leaves him paralyzed from the waist down. When we see him again in Volume 8, he's using a seal chair, the series version of a wheelchair, a carved wooden chair on goat legs that walks automatically. He's adapting, but he is furious. He's not angry at being disabled, he's angry at a world that makes being disabled harder than it needs to be. Because here's the thing, magic can heal. Body alteration magic exists. The techniques that could help Custos and by extension Qifrey are classified as forbidden. The establishment banned body modification magic because it was once misused, and now a paralyzed kid who lost the use of his legs in an accident is told the cure exists, but you can't have it. His seal chair breaks and he's completely stuck because only a witch can repair it, and the witches around him are legally forbidden from doing the one thing that would actually help. He can't travel on cobblestone paths. He struggles with even small slopes. Now, what do you think happens when a Brimmed Hat shows up and offers to graft mobility aids directly onto his body using magic that the establishment won't provide? Custos says yes. The Brimmed Hats did not create Custos. The establishment handed him to them. But what about characters who believe the system is justified? Like, Orugio is introduced in Chapter 9, trying to turn Coco over to the Knights Morales. He argues with Qifrey about it, loses, and accepts Coco reluctantly. He is not a villain. He's not even unsympathetic. He's a good man who has decided that the system, for all its obvious flaws, is better than chaos. The manga frames this as a genuinely human choice. A lot of good people stay inside unjust systems because the alternative looks worse. The manga reveals that the witch establishment has records, mostly destroyed, not entirely, of moments when evidence emerged that magic could be self-taught. Let's sit with that for a second, because this is the part of the argument that goes from uncomfortable to damning. The witch establishment did not build its monopoly in a vacuum. It built it while people kept proving the monopoly was a lie. Outsiders, regular people, the unknowing, people who had no formal training, no lineage, no access to the system, kept stumbling into magic. And over and over and over again, they had to get rid of that fact. This is active, conscious, deliberate suppression. The Tower of Tomes is the establishment's archive. It's where the Great Hall stores knowledge it considers sensitive. Historical records, research, documentation of magical incidents across centuries. Most of what Qifrey finds there is what the establishment wanted him to find: sanctioned history. Yet, Qifrey is still able to find the suppressed records despite how much the establishment wanted to keep it locked up. So you're telling me the establishment kept the records even though they were suppressing them? What'd that mean? It means that at some point, someone inside the system considered the question seriously enough to document it. Someone looked at an outsider drawing a sigil and thought, we should write this down. Someone believed the evidence was significant, and then the institution decided that significance was a threat and then buried it. Coco's arc across the manga is not just about getting better at magic. It's about understanding what her existence proves. As the manga progresses, as she encounters Custos, as she begins to understand the brimmed hats, as she learns what Qifrey is carrying, the confusion of the early chapters transforms into something else. She's not just some girl learning magic she shouldn't be able to do, she's living evidence that the most important rule in the witch world is a lie. The unknowing are not unknowing because they lack something, they're unknowing because someone decided they should be. And Coco is starting to understand exactly what it means to be that evidence, what it costs, what it demands, and what it would mean to do something about it. She's not a chosen one, but rather a proof of concept. And all of this is what makes the Witch Hat Atelier series a manga worth watching. Here's what you're getting. A magic system that is secretly a political instrument, established in Chapter 1, confirmed over hundreds of chapters. An antagonistic faction whose diagnosis of the problem is correct. A mentor who carries the enemy's experiment in his own body and teaches the girl who disproves the system's founding lie. A governing institution with a suppressed paper trail of its own crimes. A paralyzed kid radicalized not by ideology, but by a system that locked up the cure and called it forbidden. Good people complicit in injustice, not because they're evil, but because they're human. And a student in the center of all of this who's finally beginning to understand what she represents. All of this drawn in ink so detailed and beautiful that readers genuinely stop mid-chapter to sit with the page. Beyond the art, this anime and manga does so much to pull at the heartstrings. Underneath all of the politics of this series, there is a much simpler story happening. A girl wanted to do magic. She wasn't supposed to, and the world's response was to take the memory of it away from her. This is probably something that everyone has had to experience at some point. If there's ever been any point where you were told that some kind of knowledge, an opportunity, or a room was not for you, then you already know exactly what this feels like. Similar to Coco, you can rise above that. Coco is not a chosen one. She's not secretly special by blood or prophecy or the will of some higher power. She's just a girl whose whole world got rocked by a discovery she was never supposed to make, and the only reason why this discovery was hidden in the first place, the reason why what she did was so transgressive, was because someone somewhere just made the random choice about who deserves to know. A lot of you grew up with Harry Potter. That story told you the magical world was better than this one. It was kinder, more just, and governed by people who, mostly, deserved to be there. To a lot of you, it probably gave you a fantasy of belonging. Hell, it worked on me. If you had magic, you got in. You were special, and you mattered. Witch Hat Atelier tells you the magical world has the same problems as this one. The same walls, the same discrimination, the same people deciding who gets through. Yet, something about this is even more comforting than a fantasy world that you can escape to, because a story that shows you the system and names who built it is more useful than a story that lets you pretend it's all natural. Because you can't dismantle something you've been taught to see as part of the landscape. Harry Potter gave you permission to stop at the prejudice, but Witch Hat Atelier will not let you stop there. It keeps pulling you back until you're looking at the foundation, because at least someone is finally asking the right questions. Harry Potter lets you escape into a world where the injustice was someone else's fault, a dark lord, a corrupt minstrel, bad people doing bad things. Witch Hat Atelier does not let you escape. It points at the structure saying this is what injustice looks like when it's not wearing a big bad guy's face. This is what it looks like when good people enforce it because the rules say to. This is what it looks like when the system generates its own opposition and then calls that opposition evil. That's a harder story, but it is an honest one. I mean, look at Qifrey. We covered his secret earlier, but the secret is not actually what makes him heavy to think about. What makes him heavy is the choice he makes every single morning. He knows what the establishment is. He found the suppressed records and carries the Brimmed Hats' experiment in his body. He knows that Coco, this girl he teaches, this girl he chose to protect when the system wanted to erase her, is living proof that the foundational lie is exactly that. He knows all of this, but he still chooses to teach her and guide her toward the truth that the institution he lives inside would destroy the moment it became inconvenient. Now I hope you've been listening, because let me close with this. Harry Potter gave a generation permission to believe they were special because they were born different. The magic was in you. It always was. The world just had to find you. Witch Hat Atelier gives a completely different permission. It says that the systems that told you the knowledge was not for you, those systems are the things that need to change, not you. You were always capable, someone just decided you shouldn't know that. That is a more useful story. That is a more honest one, and especially right now, in a world where the question of who gets access to knowledge, to power, to the rooms where decisions are made is not a fantasy premise but something people are navigating every single day, it is a more necessary one. The witch establishment in the series does not think of itself as the villain. Most of them genuinely believe the rules are right. Some of them believe the rules are necessary, and they enforce those rules against a girl who drew a shape on a surface and watched something beautiful happen. Because the alternative is admitting that the entire thing was never natural, that it was built, that they are standing on the inside of something that was constructed to keep people out. And yeesh, that's not a story about a Dark Lord, that's a story about how power actually works. I do think that Witch Hat Atelier is definitely worth a watch this year. The anime is a stunning entry point, the adaptation is faithful, the art direction captures Shirahama's line work better than anyone had a right to expect, and it will give you the first arc of the argument in full. But the manga is even better. I think this is the anime to watch if you liked Frieren. If Frieren changed what you expected from fantasy, if you watched it and realized you were tired of stories that treat their genre conventions like routine, don't bother asking why the world works the way it does, then Witch Hat Atelier is definitely where you go next. Frieren did something that felt impossible. It took the fantasy adventure format, the party, the journey, the magic system, the final boss, and it treated grief and time and the weight of living past everyone you loved with complete adult seriousness. It made the genre feel fresh. Witch Hat Atelier is doing the same thing for the magic school genre. It takes the apprentice story, the curious child, the wise mentor, the wondrous world of magic, and it treats power, exclusion, and manufactured ignorance with the same adult seriousness. It makes you feel the genre, and then it makes you question it. That is what the best fantasy does. Not escape from the world's problems, but rather give you a clearer way to see them. Next time, we go deeper into Qifrey, the character the internet is obsessed with, and why his secret is the most morally complex mentor arc in recent manga.